Hello, everyone. I'm Kellye Eversole, president of Eversole Associates and the founder, one of the founders of Women in Genomics. I want to welcome you today to our first conversation with a woman scientist who's a leader in many things, but we're going to take a few moments, I think, while people are signing in. We thought everybody would be here immediately. So, all right. So the Women in Genomics networking began in 1998, and it's an annual event that we hold at the Plant and Animal Genome Conference, and it was an effort to facilitate networking of women working in the genomics field, primarily in agricultural genomics, but not only in agricultural genomics. And in the past few years, we've had a few video interviews that have been done, but this is our first conversation, and we think it is, one, it's the 29th of February, which doesn't happen very often. So it's a significant date for us in that regard. It is also the last day of Black History Month, and Black history is increasingly important for us to highlight because there are, unfortunately, a number of people who want to eliminate focus on Black history, and we believe it's very important to recognize the contributions that Black Americans have made and to honor Dr. Woodson, who founded in 1915 the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History. And so it's very important for us to acknowledge that. So we want to take pride in our Black history in the United States as well as in other countries. The other thing that we're about to begin tomorrow is Women's History Month, and a week from tomorrow is International Women's Day. And this year's theme, and I think it's really important, is to celebrate women who advocate for equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so it's yet another reason why we're really happy to be holding this conversation today. At this time, I'd like to introduce Rolanda Young, who's with Eversole Associates and is our events leader and has a bachelor's in communication and is quite an advocate for STEM, for science, technology, education, mathematics, and also for equity, inclusion, and diversity and belonging. So it's very important for me to recognize Rolanda. Rolanda?
Hi, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for presenting this opportunity. And I'm glad to be here to interview Camellia. So I'd like to go ahead and introduce her. Dr. Camellia Moses Okpodu is an internationally recognized biochemist, climate scholar, researcher, and consultant. She has over 35 years of experience in higher education, holding various leadership positions at several institutions such as the University of Wyoming Xavier, University of Louisiana, Norfolk, Norfolk, State University, and Hampton University. She's earned both her BS degrees in biochemistry and PhD degree in plant physiology and biochemistry from North Carolina State University. Dr. Okpodu has received numerous awards and honors for her academic and professional achievements, including being identified by academic influencers in 2022 as one of the top 10 Black biologists for the last 30 years. Although she enjoys the professional accolades, she takes great pride in being a mother and a grandmother. She has raised three college educated women, of which two have followed her into STEM, and one who shares her love for the arts. She also delights in being Gigi, which is greatest grandma, to her only grandchild, Daniel. Dr. Okpodu is passionate educator and leader who self-identifies as a JEDI, which is justice, equity, diversion, and inclusion. She is committed to excellence. Welcome, Dr. Okpodu.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here with you this afternoon.
Okay, so can you just give us a little bit about who you are and your career background?
Sure. So if you know me growing up, a lot of people call me Camilla, and it's a long, interesting story. My name is Camellia, but I can kind of tell where people know me from by how they address me. So I professionally go by Camellia. So you know when you get out of rural North Carolina, you get to the big city of Raleigh. I grew up in a little place called Supply, North Carolina. I'm sure you've heard of this metropolitan area. I was on the coast in Brunswick County, North Carolina, and I spent a childhood between North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and Wilmington, North Carolina. And I was partly raised with my aunt and uncle, who were both school teachers. And it was my uncle who was a special education teacher. And sometimes I think about, he had a very open spirit as to how different people learned, and was very, I think, ahead of his time and way he approached learning. And he didn't mind me going outside and getting in the mud or climbing a tree or doing any of those things, being very adventurous. We lived across the street from a harbor, and I spent my days going out looking at the water and collecting shells and things like that. And Uncle Legrand never limited me. My aunt was a math teacher and also home economics, and she really played into my interest in math. I remember she used to buy these books to give me to work problems. And so I was encouraged at a very early age to not think it was weird to study math and science. I am a first grade I guess I'm not a dropout, but I was put in detention in first grade because I went to school being able to read. And so I would like to talk and influence others, and I got in trouble. And so they came up with this idea. They wanted to advance me a grade level, but I refused. I wanted to stay with my friends. And I'm kind of thankful that my uncle agreed with my mom, my biological mother, that I should stay with my peer group because there's something important about that. But they came up with an ingenious plan. They put me in the library during reading hour. So whenever the kids were, and a kid who likes to read, you don't put them in the library. So I read every book, encyclopedia. They had this thing, National Geographics. I remember how that really eventually played into my being here at University of Wyoming. Early on, I saw a picture of a gentleman named George Frizzon, who was actually an anthropologist. And at the time, I didn't know that. And he was sitting at a table with a picture of a bighorn sheep. And I came home that day and I read the article, and it said that he was naming, giving them the scientific name. So at like 7 or 8 years old, I went home to my uncle and I told him, well, I saw this picture today of this guy naming all the animals. So if he can name all the animals, why can't I name all the plants? So it started my career as a plant physiologist. My uncle didn't think it was a weird request, and he let me go out in the woods and collect leaves. And then I got a book and I identified what type of leaf it was, and I made a project and entered it into 4-H. And there starts the history of my career. So my career started out kind of serendipitously through my curiosity, but the fact that I was encouraged, I wasn't thought to be, it wasn't weird that I liked math. It wasn't weird that I liked science. It was accepted. And because of that desire to learn more, it really started me on my career path. I kind of ended up in biochemistry by default because when I went to college, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I didn't know what I didn't want to do. So I knew I didn't want to be an engineer. So I thought, now that I look back on it, I probably would have been a heck of a good engineer because the way that my mind is, I think. But my biological father worked for the military and was a very good electrical nuclear engineer, and I didn't want to have that um, I didn't want to have that burden of being as good as my dad. So I decided I went to NC State. I tell this story. I wanted to be an Aggie wannabe. So if there are any Aggies in the crowd, you should know that I really wanted to go to North Carolina A&T, but at the time there was no scholarship money for me. I was in a precarious state because my aunt and uncle never really adopted me officially. And so I couldn't use their information. And because what was going on in my family, I couldn't use my parents' information. So I had gotten into some very prestigious schools, but I didn't have the money to go there. So NC State knew about me from 4-H, from entering those contests and winning ribbons and going to state championships, which they had in Raleigh at NC State. So I got to learn state's campus when I was in middle and high school. And so they reached out to me and said, we have a scholarship for you. And that made the world of difference. I didn't have the money to go to A&T at the time. A&T's tuition was not as it is now, which is more of a regulated by the state, but in the early 80s, it was still kind of expensive to go there. So I went to NC State on a scholarship, and I got there not knowing what I wanted to really do. And I tell students now, had I taken anthropology early in my career, I would have been a cultural anthropologist. I'm quite sure of it. But what I learned is that if you take science courses, I did well in those kind of courses versus my humanities courses, because to me, if you can get the right answer, it's not a boy answer or girl answer or black answer or white answer, it's just the answer, as long as you can show your work. And so I excelled in courses that I felt leveled the playing field. So that kind of gives you a nutshell, came from a very rural area. That's why I'm very passionate about the land grant institutions and making sure that even though they may have started out in not such a great way, we have to be honest with our history. But it's not that we don't acknowledge that history. As you said before, Black history is American history. And whether we like it or not, what we have to realize is how far we've come in 5 generations. And that's what we should be embracing. No other nation in the world has been able to do what America has done in 5 generations, if you think about it. And so it's not something that we should be ashamed of, but it's something we should embrace. So I say that because I felt that science and math leveled the field. Doesn't mean that that was the best at those things. It meant I had to work hard at those, but I felt that the outcome that I would be able to have an opportunity to have the same opportunity as the next person, versus my humanities classes, where to me, I remember getting put out of an English class because we were reading The Heart of Darkness. And you have to understand that I like to say I was the diversity in the room. So there was very few African-American students at NC State when I came as a freshman, and there were very few that looked like me. So I stood out. And so I was taught to have pros arguments using the data that is before you, which is what we use as science, right? Here's the evidence. And so I got challenged by one of my faculty members, and he actually put me out of his class. And that's when I discovered that faculty members they wield a lot of power. But he was saying, his summation of the story was that The Heart of Darkness was talking about the ignorance of Africa. And my summation of the story was that The Heart of Darkness was talking about man's inhumanity to man. Exactly. And it was set in Africa to remind us where civilization began. So the teacher told me to get out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I agree with you on The Heart of Darkness. It's a great book, but it really does hit with man's inhumanity to man, and saying that generically. Well, you mentioned, and I'm going to jump in so we try to keep going, but one of our participants has pointed out that the Wyoming State Science Fair will be held next Monday on the 4th, and there should be a good showing of diverse projects. And that ties in, of course, to your time with 4-H. Not only did you go through the land grant system, you also were very active in 4-H. And that leads to the importance of bringing children into agriculture and agricultural science very early and giving them those choices. So very
I
interesting.
want to say I didn't plant that question, and you should know that I'm a judge for 2 areas. I will be judging I will
Okay,
be judging
great.
computer science and plant science. So yes, I am aware that the science fair is on Monday, and within my busy schedule, I'm taking time to go over and be a judge. And
That's awesome.
I have already received the abstracts from the students electronically, and I'm so impressed with their imagination. So
That's really
yeah,
great.
yeah.
It's
You
wonderful to
can't say you're going to
see.
be a conduit for change and not do anything. That's
Yes,
just
exactly.
so.
That's exactly right. So that gets us to kind of the next thing I wanted to focus on, and that is your purpose. You know, one of the things in our webinar, in our conversation today, is focused on passion, purpose, and persistence. And you talked a lot about where your passion came from. Can you tell us a little bit about what you see as your purpose in life?
So I'm a very, as you'll learn about my play, I'm a very spiritual person, in the sense that I feel, as I told you this morning when I opened up the door, I see Sheep Mountain from my front door of my house here in Laramie. I can see it in Centennial and the snow-capped snowies, and I just think like God is welcoming me and telling me, go forth and do a good job. And so I think my role here is to be a conduit so that others can get to their next level. So a conduit is very important electrical for conducting electrons so that they can move from one source to another. So if you think of potential and children's potential, then being able to provide that connection and for all people that you come in contact with. And so that's what I think my purpose is to spread my knowledge. It's really interesting here so one of the things that I was thinking about was like my career milestones and how it's led um, um, to my purpose, right? So I started out, as I said, with 4-H. But when I found out that people will actually pay you to go to graduate school, right? So as an undergraduate, I took a lot of biochemistry courses because, as I told you, I felt they were fair courses, and I'm kind of weird. I like science in that way, and I like learning. So I kept taking these courses, and then somebody told me, it's like, you'd be good for graduate school, and they'll pay you to go to graduate school. And I was like, excuse me? People will pay you to do what it is that you like, which is asking questions. So one of the early things I did, I worked with a mentor. His name was Wolfgang Gross. He died very young. He was from Germany. He came over as a postdoc, and he was the one who trained me. And we discovered a new enzyme that people said didn't exist, and we were able to show that it existed. And now that enzyme and the knowledge of that enzyme has led to many other areas of science. And then I think another career milestone was at Hampton University in Hampton, Virginia, which is the first historically Black college that I ever worked with. And Hampton had a connection with me, and that when I was at Virginia Tech, I learned the story of Booker T. Washington, who wasn't that far away from where I was in Blacksburg and Martinsville, I think is the name of that town. And I learned about his story and how he came to Hampton just to learn to read. And I realized that if Booker T can, so can I, right? Which
Very
it,
good.
which led from a story that I got to meet Oprah with. So that came about in a book, How Gene Won, um, from my interview on Oprah. And I talked about in my story, I learned that if Booker T can walk, so he can learn how to read, that I had all the things that I needed. I just had a few people who were telling me what I couldn't do because of my gender and my color. So if he can do it, I can too. So Hampton was instrumental. I will always love Hampton. It will always be a part of my story. My daughter went to Howard, so we now have arguments about who's the real HU.
Exactly.
And then I guess the other thing, career-wise, is reinventing myself, coming out to the University of Wyoming with the expectation I was the dean of arts and science at Xavier University in Louisiana, the nation's only Black and Catholic institution. It was at Xavier that I formulated my JEDI idea, making sure that we provide equity and diversity and inclusion. But if we do that without justice, to me, if you provide justice and inclusion, equity and diversity will follow. It's just, so I call myself a JEDI. And anytime I get to quote Star Wars, I think it's a win-win. So, but reinventing myself here, coming out here with one expectation, and then learning on the very first day of my job that my job would change, my role would change. So I came out here to be the dean, and then they decided that that they were going to get rid of the college that I came from, and I transitioned to agriculture, and I went back to the faculty, and I've never given up research. If you look at my CV, I've never given up research. Research is what I do, and I plan to be like Barbara McClintock. I plan to be like 95 years old, and they're like, "Where is Dr. Okpodu? How did she die?" She was in the laboratory looking through the microscope.
That's the way it should be.
I was like, I'm never going to stop questioning. I'm never going to stop learning. I'm always going to ask that. But being a JEDI, I think, is making sure that you provide opportunities for all people.
And I have, since we discussed that you are a JEDI in January, I've adopted that. I've decided to do that too. So yeah. I'm not much of a Star Wars person, but.
And so now I know what I have to send you for Christmas.
Well, we have all of them. It's not that they're not here in the house. I just have not been that, haven't been that much of a, anyway, not focused on that. So, yes. But I know a lot of people are, and particularly those who were in college in the 80s. I had already left, I was already gone. So, but we are getting, just to remind everyone, you can put your questions in the Q&A panel. There is a Q&A panel. We have some questions in the chat, but maybe Rolanda, you want to take a look at those, or?
Mm-hmm. Do you want to wait to the Q&A portion to go into it, or do you want to?
Oh, I forgot about that.
It's
yeah,
okay.
Sorry. Yeah, very good. No, we can do those during the Q&A. And if we can get those in the Q&A panel, that would be great. So I guess you've covered a little bit, about your history and being on the Oprah Winfrey show, and then how you've maintained your passion for science, and but and I think Rolanda's got the next question for you.
Yeah, I would just like to ask, with your achievements, including being on Oprah, and named one of the top 10 Black biologists in the nation by academic influence, that's really remarkable. But how do you maintain your passion for science amidst the recognition and success?
So, my whole mantra, passion, purpose, persistence, is because I feel once you figure out what you're passionate about, and I said this in my Martin Luther King Day speech in Cheyenne, there's not a devil in hell that can change you when you feel what you're passionate about, even if they tell you on your first day that they're getting rid of your position, right? And most people would have freaked out. I mean, and it's not that I didn't feel that I should freak out. In my play, Faith of Our Mothers, I write a section in there, and one of the parts that I tell that when I heard that, I really wanted to flip over the tables like Jesus did when he went in the temple and saw the people collecting their taxes. I just wanted to flip over everything. But then Michelle Obama's voice came in my head. When they go low, you go high. Because every Black person who comes after you will be judged by the behavior that you've done, whether that's fair or not, right? So I maintain my passion because for whatever reason, I just like learning. I have this thing about learning new ideas. Like right now, I'm in the data science. I got one of the very first data science fellowships at the university offered, this is the reason why I was at the the Plant and Animal Genome Conference, because I learned about the conference from getting that funding, and to have other people who are interested in the same kind of things that I'm interested in. I maintain my passion by staying with the literature, being around people who ask good questions. My good friend is I have several friends that I feel as mentors, and a cohort that helps me to stay grounded. And one of my mentors, friends, is a sociologist, which I've done a lot of work with climate with her. She's at Norfolk State. And Dr. Bernadette Holmes and I have continued to collaborate. So that makes me more rounded than just the biochemistry and the molecular biology, that I have reached out so I can be able to communicate with people from different and diverse backgrounds. One of my mentors, I tell people, get two friends. Make sure one is a sociologist and the other one is a theoretical physicist. So my other friend is a theoretical physicist, Dr. Arlene Macklin. She's been more of not a mentor, but a sponsor. You need a sponsor in your life. So she'll tell me where opportunities are. Like, she sent me something just yesterday about an opportunity from NSF with the plant genome. And so she's looking out to make sure that she knows what my interests are. We need to be that chasm to help to bridge that chasm for people. That's what a conduit does, is doing for others what you would want done for yourself. When I took the role as the dean, and at both Xavier and here at University of Wyoming, I said to my faculty, I wish to be the dean that I never had. You know, I want to be that person who makes sure that you can do the work that you need to do. At both places, I was a dean of both of the social and behavior sciences, as well as the natural sciences were under my tutelage. So I had to make sure that I provided opportunities for both parts of the portfolio. And oftentimes when people think you're STEM, they just assume that you're going to just concentrate on the STEM people. Well, they have resources to them. I needed to help the people who didn't have the resources. So one of the things I've done here at the University of Wyoming, I don't know if you followed what's been going on here in our state, a number of interesting things, but one of the phenomena that happened when I was dean, they told me they were going to get rid of philosophy and religion, gender and women's studies. And I said to myself, so I learned this all on the first day that I came on campus, and they're getting rid of my job. So 3 things that are going to happen. And I said, whatever happens will happen, but I will be like Esther. If I perish, let me perish. But there's no way I'm going to let a land-grant institution get rid of philosophy and religion. I might have a degree in biochemistry, but I understand the mission of a land-grant institution is to make sure the farmer and mechanic's child have access to the classics. In other words, a child who was like me from a rural area, who got into the Ivy League schools, but didn't have the resources to go there, shouldn't have an education that is not of high quality. So I knew that I figured they were gonna, what did I have to lose? They already told me I didn't have a job. But I was not going to have the little asterisk in the history book that says the first African-American female dean allowed them to get rid of philosophy and religion. And so I said, no way. And I said out loud to the provost and president, well, if you do that, if you get rid of philosophy and religion, don't call this a university. Just call it a technical college. So people can say that, you know, the dean is a little snobbish, but I believe that the farmer and mechanic's child, the person who comes to the land grant, needs to have the same exposure and opportunities those who have the money and resources to send them to a private, more, I guess, you know, Ivy League school. So one of the things that was really interesting is that I think that at NC State, they poured that into me as a freshman, because we were always feeling like, and so NC State's colors are red and white and black, and Carolina's colors are blue and white. So my statement, NC State, we always felt like the redhead stepkids, because we were always comparing ourselves to Chapel Hill. So they wanted us to know why we were here. So,
yeah, no, that's really, Go ahead, Rolanda, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just gonna just ask, you have so much going on. How do you balance all of this? Like where do you find your work-life balance?
So when I was raising 3 kids, I don't even know how I did what I did. First of all, I used to take my daughters to. I have a theory. If you want to create a scientist, just drag your children with you to every scientific meeting. So the first child and the second child got the benefit of me taking them to every meeting because I didn't have any. I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to take her to the National Biochemistry meeting. I didn't have a babysitter. They didn't have daycare, and I had to give my paper, and so my child had to come with me. So my oldest daughter, I laugh now with my friends, and I tell them I probably will get in trouble. But when she was about 3 years old, that's how I know how long I've been doing this as a career. I brought her to the lab. I gave her some gloves. I gave her a pipette box, and she had to count out 50 pipette tips. That's how she learned to count. So she was around science all the time. I don't know if I balance, in one of my interviews, I tell people, to me, if you have children, you're doing most everything, whether you're married or not, you're still kind of like a single parent, especially because I was raising daughters, and my last name is Nigerian. My ex-husband was very important and instrumental in the girl's life, but culturally it was my expectation to make sure that the girls were okay, and I had no problem with that. So I don't think there's anything like balance if you see what you do as part of who you are and you incorporate it. I would have conversations with them about what I was doing in the lab. I never forget when my oldest daughter was a freshman in college. She went off to do an REU, and we got a phone call. Her mentor got a phone call that she was in the lab the whole time, and she was doing research that the graduate students weren't doing. Well, she grew up in the lab, so that was not a foreign thing to go to the lab. Um, my middle daughter liked environmental stuff, so I did a lot of outside work. I do a lot of climate stuff where it relates to changes in plant physiology. And so Elizabeth, I remember she came to me and said, I don't want to just do one of these, science projects they have. I want to do a real experiment. So we designed a real experiment for her to do in my lab, and talked to her about the method, the scientific method, and she went on. And we were talking the other day because now we got a third generation of scientists. My grandson just entered the Odyssey of the Mind contest, and he's moving on to states. And we were talking about when Elizabeth was that age, how she came to me. So I balanced it by not thinking that I had to have everything. I don't know if that makes sense to you. I just put my hand on the plow and just kept moving forward, and not worrying about what society said. Because eventually I ended up with the 3 girls by myself. And so one of the things I did and I saw one of my former students who's actually like a daughter to me is on this call. I just saw her put something in the chat. I made use of my community. So I made sure that I involved the girl, like I did Girl Scouts. I was a Girl Scout counselor. I took 25 girls to, I think it's called the Natural Bridge in Virginia. I don't know if you've ever been to the Natural Bridge, or hiking to the Natural Bridge so they could get that badge about hiking, but it's very slippery. And I was like, what was I thinking? But at the time I was in my 30s. So, I look back on it now, it's like, that was really wild. You took 25 kids. I had some other parents, but I was the Girl Scout leader. My other kids wanted to play sports, and I believed in making sure that they were in conditions where they had to listen to other authority. And I think that's one of the benefits of being in a sports team. My girls people ask me, were your children really good at all those sports? No, I just made them play, because you have to learn that sometimes you're not the best at something. And that's a learning lesson in that. So I balanced it through using what I had at my disposal, which was a community and athletics, sports. I was a soccer coach, and I figured I knew about soccer because for 20 some years I was married to a professional soccer player. That's how I got the last name Okpodu. So I figured that some of that had rubbed off on me. So I coached soccer and I was involved in and I was involved in my kids' life in that way. It allowed me to be connected to them. And then with the Catholic Church, I did a lot with the Catholic Church and the community science fairs. I always did with science fairs. Um, I always participated in whatever outreach they had. I got the training that they have, like how to work with young people to make sure you keep young people safe. And I have used that and I've translated it. I didn't get to do as much as I would like to have done at Xavier because I was there during the pandemic. But out here, I have started a relationship with the Arapaho Indians Nation, and I'll be doing some work in the Wind River with a colleague from anthropology, uh, doing genomics with them. So
Yeah.
taking what I know and expanding it to the community.
Well, the other thing, and I know there are a lot of questions coming in, so keep them coming in and we'll try to get to them all. But you also have done outreach to the prisons there
Yes.
in Wyoming. And, you know, I think what you've been talking about a lot has been wherever you are, you're spreading your messages and your purpose and trying to enable people to excel in whatever situation that they are. And I think that's really to be commended. And I agree. I was an athlete. I agree in that team sports are very important, and they also teach you that you're part of a team.
Exactly.
You're not playing tennis as a one-person tennis player. You're part of a team, and so it's not just on you. It's how you operate within that team. And science is very much like that as well. Even if you have a PI who has gets that recognition of quote being a PI, that PI can't do anything without the team that's supporting the PI. So I think those are all really very important. And I appreciate you talking a lot about the mentors and supporters along the way, and that I think those are all important roles for us all to play. And hopefully through our Women in Genomics series, that we can try to help mentor many other people. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and you did talk, about your situation, that how you came to Wyoming, and I think Rolanda has a question for you uh, with regard to that.
Yes, so I was gonna try to get into your play. So, "Faith of Our Mothers" is set to be performed as part of as part of the University of Wyoming theater series. Can you discuss how your journey and experience have influenced the themes and messages portrayed in your play?
Yeah, or even the thrust of the play.
Yeah.
So the play came about. So I told you I like to read. So Mark Twain was one of the people that I always enjoyed reading, and he has this sarcasm that I love. And so it occurred to me, you don't mess with a person who likes to write, okay? Because they will write you into their story. So the very first thing I did when I left Virginia to go to New Orleans was I grew up in a church called the African Methodist Episcopal Church. And Richard Allen is the founder of that church, which originated in Pennsylvania. And Alcimium Jones is the other who found the other faith from the Friend Society, who started an Episcopalian faith. So these are the two early Black churches. So I grew up in the AME tradition, with my aunt and uncle, and my mother's faith community is Missionary Baptist Church, Missionary Baptist, which, if you look at their thrust with the Missionary Baptist, it's very similar to the African Methodist Episcopal Church, except in the AME Church, we do more acknowledgement of our African heritage. It's embracing our African heritage, but if you look at our doctrine, we are Methodists. So we didn't leave the Methodist Church because we had a difference in philosophy, like Baptists, my understanding with the missionary Baptists is you got to go through the world and you got to baptize people. Our Methodism, we didn't change from Wesleyan's teaching. What happened with us is that Richard Allen started this church because we weren't allowed to have equity. They weren't allowed to be at the same level as other members. And so they left and they decided to call themselves the African Methodist Episcopal Church. So the very first thing when I got the job in Xavier, I Googled, is there an AME church in New Orleans? What are lots of AME churches in Louisiana? So I knew that I would have a community. So you remember when I told you I was raising my children, I used the community. I used the church, Catholic Church and the AME church. And they were my community. And I understood why that would be important to me. And so when I got the offer to come out to Wyoming, I came out and I kept saying, if they, if I got this job, so that on my tour, I was one of the 3 people they brought to campus. When on my tour, we went down Grand Avenue, which is the main stairwell for in front of the university, and I saw Old Tools Catholic Church. So coming from New Orleans, coming from Xavier with a Catholic background, the nation's only Black and Catholic institution, this church is huge. And I was like, well, I know I'll have a faith community. If I get this job, I won't be out here by myself, because there's obviously a lot of Catholics, because that's a big church, right? But then on a whim, I decided, is there an AME church in Wyoming? And everybody laughed at me. Girl, there's gonna be no AME church in Wyoming. And there is an AME church in Wyoming. So to my surprise, I started wondering, well, how did the AME church get way out here? Because AME Church traditionally is on the eastern seaboard, and goes down to south to Georgia, Mississippi, and Louisiana, and then some in Texas, but mostly then it goes on the West Coast, because during the Great Exodus from in the early 1920s, African Americans moved from New Orleans. They either went up to Chicago from Mississippi and New Orleans, or they went out west. So I understand how the AME church got out there, but I couldn't figure out how it got here. So there starts my research and the quest to develop my play. I found out that there was a foundress, Lucinda Phillips, and you should know, everyone who's listening, I started a foundational account here at the University of Wyoming to create the Lucinda Phillips Fellowship. We have never had a fellowship for an African-American person, in particular, African-American woman. We have the Black 14 which is a scar on the history of the university, which they're trying to rectify. So we have that, but we've never had something that was really geared towards women. So I've started the Lucinda Phillips Foundation. And if you want to send me an email to figure out how to give to that, I'd greatly appreciate it. It's using some of the money to actually support the production of the play. So, and trying to figure out how Lucinda Phillips, who originated in Kentucky, got to Wyoming at the end of slavery. She came out here on the Union Pacific Railroad, one of the first trips, the Union Pacific Railroad. So my historical novel and play is about that, how the AME Church got to Wyoming. And in the play, the first act of the play it's opening with me telling the story of my experience here and how this led me to wonder how the church got here, because the church has been foundational for me. And I am a member of the Allen Chapel, which is the name of our church in Cheyenne. I joined my first ability to get over to Cheyenne. I joined the faith community. Thank God for the internet. I'm able to watch them on through Facebook, because of the conditions in the summit are not always passable during this time of the year. It can be nice and sunny here as it is today, and then I get in the summit and everything is white out and you can't see anything. So I've learned my lesson about how the weather works out here. But so my play came about explaining my own faith journey, as well as telling the story of how AME Church got to the West. And I think it's a very fascinating story. I actually get to incorporate my first day of wanting to turn over the tables in the room into the play. And as I told you earlier, I realized if I was to act a fool, as my mama would say, I would make it hard for every person who came behind me, and I didn't want to do that. So when they went low, I went high. So
Well, I think
that's
that's
how the
really
plant came
wonderful.
about.
So we're gonna move now to the questions. We've got a lot of great questions, some about science and some other questions about your career. Um, so let's go to the first one, which is, can you talk about the importance of photosynthesis?
Yeah, and that must be Keisha Lewis. Keisha Lewis,
Oh,
are you asking me about photosynthesis?
it's Arlene Macklin.
Dr. Macklin, that's my mentor. That's the physicist.
I know, that's the reason I pulled it
So
up.
interestingly, I'm just finishing up talking about carbon sequestering and how photosynthesis is the model which we've been mimicking with photomics and other areas of physics to look at how light energy is captured. And so um, uh, photosynthesis is ribisco, which is we say the most abundant enzyme in the world, is important for taking in what I call the photochemical reactions, those things that happen only in the presence of light, and associating them with the biochemical reactions, which are the reactions that actually take in CO2 to make the intermediates that are going to then be fixed as a carbon to go into carbohydrates, sugars, so that the plant can store them for further use and that we benefit. And as a part of the light reactions, you generate oxygen. And so the oxygen liberated, for a long time, we didn't know that. That was one of the main mysteries of how do plants give off oxygen. Early 1772, and I told the students recently, Priestley's experiment in 1772 in England, if you think about what was going on 4 years later in America, we were becoming a country, right? But things were going on scientifically, and I bring this photosynthesis and the study of photosynthesis, carbon sequestration, which is green energy and green technology. I have on April 19th, mark your calendars, the climate conversation, and our emphasis this year is green energy and renewable energy. And so if you're interested to have a bigger conversation about that, you should definitely you just Google my name, Camellia Okpodu, climate conversations, and it will come up on the website. But so photosynthesis is essential to all of us. It's going to be, I think, the thing that we now for new clean energy. And I know Arizona State University has a center as well as others. I'm hoping here at the University of Wyoming to work with our School of Energy, which was just on 60 Minutes. I'm hoping you guys saw my friend Holly, who was on 60 Minutes, talking about our School of Energy and some of the things we're doing with renewables here in Wyoming. So I hope that answers your question, Dr. Malcolm. Yeah.
That covers quite a bit about photosynthesis and carbon sequestration and the importance for dealing with climate change. All right, so the next question is, in your opinion, what are the most pressing roadblocks we need to address for women and minority groups in science?
So and access to early, like, I think the reason why I was a scientist is because I had 4-H. And it provided me access. Not only did I stay, because in rural kids, we're out, even though I lived at the close to the water, we were out from any real town. So Wilmington was 30 minutes north of us, and North Myrtle Beach was 30 minutes south of us. But what it did with 4-H is they provided opportunities for us to go to museums. So we got on buses, we went into Raleigh, and they made sure that we had the opportunity. And I think we need to do that for all kids, both men, no matter what gender or how they identify. So here in Laramie, I've recently worked with something called Laramie Cares, and I went over to the middle school to talk to kids to kind of give them the idea of data science. Okay, very, very. I didn't have to have any equipment. I just brought sheets of paper. And we talked about what data is and how we analyze data, and a whiteboard with a marker. And those kids had lots of fun. And I had lots of fun because at that time I was having a horrible day, and I went over and talked to the kids, the young people, and that actually revitalized me as well. So I think for young people, it's particular girls, is that let them know that anybody can do science. It's not a boy thing or a girl thing. It's asking questions and teaching them how to ask questions. and making access.
Yep,
Access is not having a lot of money. Access is just providing opportunities, and you can use everything as a teachable moment.
yeah, exactly. So one of the other questions actually comes, kind of follows on that line is, what advice would you give to young women scientists who are in the developing countries, and how do they continue following their dreams and get jobs in an exclusive and sexist society?
So this is something I'm trying to do out here, and I hadn't said anything to anybody, is we need to create our own economy. We need to create our own jobs. I used to say when I was at Norfolk State that Norfolk State University is a state institution. We got state support. UVA got state funding. Okay, so
Yeah.
we can't wait for the state of Virginia or any other state to save us. We had to figure out a way to save ourselves. So Dr. Macklin and I wanted to have an international opportunity for our students. And so what we did is we found a grant, we wrote a grant, we competed, we were competitive, and we were able to get that money to take our students abroad for 10 years. And we're going to be writing about that very soon. She asked me to write with her an article, a chapter for a book that she's going to be part of, and we're going to be writing about that experience. So my advice to young women in developing countries: we have a mentoring program, especially with the women in genomics. Find a mentor. I still mentor some young people in South Africa that I met through Arlene and Dr. Smith, Sonia Smith at Howard University. They introduced me to these young plant scientists. And sometimes all you need is encouragement, because we are in a male-dominated area. And the women's prison program, I'm actually working with them about the concept of, I always tell people, keep hope alive. And so Jesse Jackson actually stole that from me. And because we are the hope. We are the possibility of the future. So when I say to them, we're reading this book, Braiding Sweetgrass. I highly recommend it. It's about Native and Indigenous ways of knowing. The author is a Potawatomi Indian. And the young women that I'm working with who are incarcerated have enjoyed this book because Dr. Kimmer talks about when she went to present, her student went to present her work, how she got pushback from the male colleagues. But at the end, when she generated the data speaks for itself. And that's the kind of skin you have to develop. It's not that we shouldn't question or expect to be questioned. I think sometimes they question us differently than they do their male colleagues. But just because somebody questions you doesn't mean that you don't have the ability to do what you said you want to do. You have to just have a mindset to be your very best, and know that everybody's not going to believe in your dream. There are some people who are actually, I think, hardwired to be negative Neds and negative Nancy. They're just negative people, and you have to realize that your opinion is just important as the next guy. I have a younger sister, and I tell her this all the time. Why are you so invested in what other people think? I don't really care. I've never have. I was the first African-American in Miss Brunswick County. I was told I was too dark by somebody in my community. And I realized that that's relative, right? If I would have taken that mindset and listened to that individual, I would have never tried. So you have to realize that your opinion is what you need to be most vested in. I have a little slip of paper that I have above my desk to remind me why I do what I do, because you'll always get people. I've been told that when I was a dean, I did too much research. I've never heard of that before.
Right.
And I want to tell the person who told me that you don't do enough.
I have a little thing in front of my desk that I see, and I've had it there for many years, and it's, what would you attempt to do if you knew you could not fail? And if you always remember that
Yes.
just continue on. So let's keep going with some of the questions. The next one is, do you have any suggestions for young early career researchers for establishing their professional or research career? And then I'm going to ask the follow-on question from that is there anything you would have done differently if you had to start over again? And that kind of leads to this early career. I think that those two things tie in.
Okay, so with regards to the early career, how I was successful is that I was able early on, I met Arlene Macklin. So get yourself a theoretical physicist who actually writes a lot of proposals. And I was at Hampton University when I ran into Dr. Macklin. I don't think she even remembers this, but I remember because it was life-changing for me. And she told one of the persons that I was friends with, which we already had a mutual friend, to make sure that as I was a new faculty member, assistant professor, that Dr. Okpodu writes some grants to NASA because you have NASA funding, and you help her get her foot in the door, and you mentor her, you read her proposals, and so get a network of people that you can trust that won't steal your ideas, but you feel that you can give them your papers and they can give you feedback. I think that community and creating that type of career liaison is important. I have been so blessed that I have had people in my life who have poured into me. And this is reason why that I want to make sure that I'm a conduit for others because of what was given to me. But find someone that you can trust and who will also tell you the truth, because Dr. Macklin is a truth teller. So she will also tell me when I'm not doing what I need to be doing. Okay. Right. And she will push me and say, I think you're better than that, and here's why. And sometimes we don't ask those questions of ourselves because we want to take the safe way. But I would say early suggestion to me, which has worked for me, is having a mentor, working with somebody who, and you never stop needing a mentor. Right now, I asked Dr. Kellye wish she would read my proposal that I'm writing to that Arlene told me about. And she agreed. And David Horowitz, who is at University of North Dakota, he's also agreed to help me. So even at this level, I'm a full professor. I still feel as if I need to make sure that I have a mentor and a network. And I think that has been, if I had to do this all again, I would be an anthropologist. I didn't find out about anthropology until it was my senior year. Because of my experience with the Heart of Darkness experience, I decided I'm not taking any more humanities classes. These people are too subjective. I'm going to go over here to chemistry and math, where I know that if I get the right grade answer and I show them work, they can't tell me that it's not the right answer, right? So it was my senior year, and they said, well, if you want to get a degree, you have to take the social sciences and humanities. So I remember taking like 21 hours of like sociology and anthropology, and I fell in love with anthropology. But by that time, it was too late for me to change my major. My mother was like, "Yeah, that's great, sweetie, but you need to go ahead and get out and get a job." So I would probably, if I had to do it again, I would do more cultural anthropology. I don't think I'd change anything about my journey, even with all the things, because I think those things have come together to make me who I am and has led to me figuring out what my passion was. That day, you can imagine how unnerved I was that I moved my whole life across the country to be told that I wouldn't have a job, right? But I felt like the ancestors spoke to me and said, don't panic. They may have brought you out here for one thing, but I'm going to use you for another. And I can tell you right now, I'm doing all this work on euphorbia, which is a big problem out here. The species of leafy spurge causes, I don't know how much, $40 million were lost in cattle and horses. And it's a type of plant that makes this white latex. And if the animals chew it, it actually messes with their intestinal, causing them intestinal problems and failure to thrive. They can't put on any weight. And so spurge is a problem. Well, I did my postdoc at Virginia Tech in the weed science department. And I laughed. I was like, it's funny that one man's junk is another man's treasure, because leafy spurge is actually in the same family as poinsettias. So since I know about that, I'm just taking my knowledge and repackaging it. So, but if I had to do it again, I'd be an anthropologist.
Yeah, well, you still have time, when you retire from University of Wyoming, you can then proceed learning something else. But, well, I want to thank both of you for participating, Camellia and Rolanda, and it's been really interesting and fascinating to see your dedication, your focus, and in fact, your passion, purpose, and persistence. And I think you're a role model for all young women and even us old women in science. So keep up that good work. And we're going to actually finish this conversation with a recording of Camellia reading the prologue of her play. So I want to thank you again very much, and let's roll to this play, and it will be performed next February in Wyoming at the University
February 14th, Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day. Yes. So.
How I got over, oh my Lord, see my soul look back and wonders how I got over. Yes, how I got over. When my soul does look back and wonder. Song on the March on Washington. Coming from New Orleans, I learned about Mahale, a great woman of gospel, and her music became endearing to me. I know it was my faith that has brought me through this journey. And as you will learn, it took me 3 days to make it from New Orleans to Laramie, Wyoming. I left on July 1st, 2021, during a bad tropical storm. I was excited about my journey. July 1st was my father's birthday. Before accepting this job at the University of Wyoming as the Dean of the College of Arts and Science, I noted on my first trip that there was a faith community. I saw St. Lawrence Old Tool Catholic Church on Grand Avenue. It's a substantial church, so I know that there was at least a Roman Catholic community I could join. But on a hunch, I decided to Google, is there an African Methodist Episcopal AME church in Wyoming? And to my surprise, the search said yes, in Cheyenne. Well, I had to investigate just how the AME church got to Wyoming. And is it still a functioning church or congregation? Yes, it's still a functioning congregation and church. And I discovered that a former slave from Kentucky, Miss Lucinda Lucy Phillips, helped to bring the church to Cheyenne. So in my mind, I wondered how she learned about the church. It was started in Philadelphia. So what you're about to hear from Faith of Our Mothers is my envisioning how this might have happened, and how Allen Chapel, which is the name of the church Lucy Phillips founded, has been pivotal in my faith walk here in Laramie and has helped me to persist.
Path as we lead to National or Women's History Month, and also the International Day of Women next week. So thank you all again, and we hope to see you all participate in our next webinar. And if you have suggestions for who we ought to bring in for a conversation, let us know. All right, thank you all.